Today's broad outlook should rob the plan of any element of fantasy, which the narrow outlook of 1900 years ago, or of only 30 years ago, might have demanded. It will be shown that the surface of the moon is in fact a land area of the many worlds fashioned likeness Earth of which Moses spoke. It will be proved that the surface of the moon is a land area of the many mansions which Christ's parable mentioned. Technical divisions of the United States government have already publicly announced that if occasion required, they could put a man on the surface of the moon. Something has been written about the moon. In a previous chapter, much more can be written. The moon has always befuddled astronomers and their associated theorists. It does not fit into the man-made mechanistic pattern of the universe. It continues to present itself as a celestial riddle, because theorists mistakenly persist in considering it an isolated body, remote from other celestial sky, like the areas whereas the moon represents celestial sky area, where solar reflection at varying angles during our calendar month accentuates the natural skylight of celestial areas in the reflection's course. That course is dictated by the sun's movement. Hence it is the reflection at different angles which produces for terrestrial inhabitants the spectacle commonly known as phases of the moon. Such condition has lacked adequate explanation for many centuries, and it must forever be without explanation. If we continue mistakenly to construe the moonlight is indicative of an isolated body. The moon of our observation is most definitely not a body of any nature, unless we wish to consider it a body of celestial skylight, holding the additional light of solar reflection in a realistic view of the universe whole. It represents only an isolated celestial skylight condition, and the isolated condition is produced by the only truly isolated body in the entire creation, that is the sun. Thus, through that sun's reflection on the gaseous and moving celestial skylight there, is developed light shadings conveniently described as the man in the moon. The shavings do not represent anything on the celestial land surface, underlying the dual luminosity of natural celestial skylight, intensified by solar reflection. They are sole products of life existing in celestial sky area over the celestial land. Experienced have shown that the so-called man in the moon life shavings may be considered any of numerous formations depending upon individual fancy, when observed from different altitudes and under varying circumstances of observation, however, and regardless of any and all interpretations of what the light shadings resemble. The dark patches and that luminous celestial moon area remain aspects of the luminosity. They bear no relation whatever to the celestial land underlying the luminosity. The most obvious condition of light shading is at no time afforded consideration by the astronomer. He seeks to establish it as an aspect of the land by intensive magnification of the celestial sky. Like the area already magnified through solar reflection, from that intensified magnification of light is developed, and numerous light pits they are submitted for unwary public view. As the astronomer's classical canyons on the moon, most astounding, the light distortions resolving from magnification of skylight over a celestial land area known as the moon are interpreted as landmass formations on the land surface of that particular celestial area. Such as phenomenal conclusion develops in spite of the fact that the celestial land area cannot be telescopically detected through the celestial skylight density, where the light pit canyons are produced over the land under that doubly illuminated celestial sky area, completely covered with realistic canyons known to exist on some terrestrial land areas. There's no lens capable of detecting them through the active luminous sky gas as previously related. That lumen, as an active sky gas, covers the entire land of the universe. Whole and recent U.S. naval research has established, and numerous light pits they are submitted for unwary public view. As the astronomer's classical canyons on the moon, most astounding, the light distortions resolving from magnification of skylight over a celestial land area known as the moon are interpreted as landmass formations on the land surface of that particular celestial area. Such as phenomenal conclusion develops in spite of the fact that the celestial land area cannot be telescopically detected through the celestial skylight density, where the light pit canyons are produced over the land under that doubly illuminated celestial sky area, completely covered with realistic canyons known to exist on some terrestrial land areas. There's no lens capable of detecting them through the active luminous sky gas as previously related. That lumen, as an active sky gas, covers the entire land of the universe. Whole and recent U.S. naval research has established that it likewise covers every land area of the Earth. Therefore, the Russian government, in common with any other government, came during the next 2 years explore the land surface underlying the light of the moon. Such memorable accomplishment will not require shooting up or not from terrestrial land areas normal at fantastic speed of movement be required. The airplane speeds of our time will be sufficient. More important, our time as the celestial and exploration accomplished to date by that government which does not publicize all its findings for the benefit of Christian nations. As this chronicle of prophecy's fulfillment was being brought to timely conclusion, an international news dispatch of April 6 to 1955 dealt with celestial matters much closer to terrestrial areas than the moon. That message, despite its seeming fantasia, was the tired in the raiment of realism, now adequately attiring. He also once dreamed sky-piercing rockets, guided missiles, and atom bombs. It spoke of reality, equivalent to that of the familiar electric light refrigerator automobile an airplane had told in no uncertain terms of the United States government. 6 petition for conquest at land areas of the universe about us. And that conquest was not to be through the conjectured manner of shooting up or hug from the terrestrial little bird to construct Navy base on South Pole expedition. The Navy announcement said that 5 ships, 14 planes, a mobile construction battalion with special Antarctic equipment, and a total of 1,393 officers and men will be involved in the expedition specification for the South Pole base. Provide the expedition shall procure the necessary material and construct a satellite base at the South Pole. An unprecedented expedition of airplane ships and manpower was to move straight ahead over land, and if feasible on the water was extending beyond the South Pole point, and that expedition was to penetrate into Celestial and Aries, which appear to be up from the Earth. Popular misconception holding to the traditional shooting up fallacy may question the necessity for such a lengthy journey to the South Pole to establish a base for movement into celestial areas. That question would be kindred to the 1928 conjecture by friends of Captain Sir George Hubert Wilkins. It may be recalled that their misconception caused them to believe that Wilkins would be drawn through space to another planet. If he ventured beyond the South Pole, the question would be reasonable only in the orthodox and erroneous outlook that the terrestrial were in fact isolated. In accordance with assumption of theory, we would have to shoot up to reach celestial areas, and since there will be no shooting up, we are not isolated from the universe. Hence, the planned course of the United States government should at long last provide convincing evidence that the Earth is not isolated in space, and that course of movements straight ahead beyond the South Pole should make it manifest that there is no other course. If the government officials responsible for that announcement had been planning a movement other than over accredited land beyond the South Pole, it would be unreasonable to establish a satellite base at such a remote point. The base could more conveniently be established in Maryland or any other more accessible point. It was disclosed that the world's elder explorer, Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd, was to command the government's memorable expedition into that endless land beyond the South Pole rear. Admiral Byrd was a very practical person who knew that he did not shoot up or out from the North Pole appointed performance of his 1947 journey over land and water extending the young Earth's supposed northern end. He did not contemplate a flight movement, contrary to that which would transport him from his Boston home to the Navy building in Washington, D.C. He knew that he was to move straight ahead on terrestrial level from the South Pole point. Prior to his departure from San Francisco, he delivered the momentous radio announcement, "This is the most important expedition in the history of the world." The subsequent January 13, 1956, penetration of land beyond the pole to an extent of 2,300 miles, proof that the Admiral had not been exaggerating for the United States base at that point, is the most important base this nation or any other nation has ever held, hence the now proved movement straight ahead, and on the same level from either pole point will establish terrestrial men on the land of his celestial cousins. And our celestial cousins will bear all the physical characteristics of terrestrial men and women, for strange as it may seem and difficult of comprehension. as it no doubt is for the astronomers, celestial inhabitants of the same quality and quantity of oxygen is that too, which we have access at terrestrial points. The land extending beyond both terrestrial imaginary poles is even in the area of worlds beyond the poles. It is an area of the worlds envisioned by the prophet Moses. 300 years. It is a land area room with many mansions of Christ disclosures 1930 years ago. Just beyond the northern and southern polar fringes of the terrestrial continue, the celestial land and waters leading throughout the universe whole, from such polar points, we may at once a well-continued eternity without shooting up to the value of the moon, and to Mars and Jupiter, and to any other area of the universe, whole the so-called heavens above to be observed at every angle, out from the terrestrial begin, where the northern and southern terrestrial polar ice diminishes. A 7-hour flight into land areas of the heavens above was accomplished in the memorable naval exploit of February 1947. That performance beyond the North Pole point of theory was so simple that adequate explanation would have rendered it most confusing, and it is evident that no one was capable of explaining. In that 1947 Naval Task Force flight, there was land and water and vegetation. Under the airplane courses, progress was made north from the North Pole point. If the naval force had possessed motive supplies enabling them to continue, and the equipment to provide essential bases along the route, they could have hand-painted rated into the celestial for 100,000 miles and more. Instead of only 1,700 miles, the 1956 naval penetration of land beyond the South Pole extended for 2,300 miles over land area of the so-called heavens. Above recent and planned international polar expeditions can extend as far into the universe of August as their resources will permit. There is no end to the extent of possible penetration. The unlimited natural wealth of celestial areas extending from the terrestrial polar points has already developed a spirit of competition between nations, and it should stimulate all possible corporate exploitation after centuries of empty conjecture. Knowledge is at hand. At land routes to the untold wealth of the deceivingly patterned universe extend beyond the eye-slot passages of the North Pole, and the South Pole. Continued penetration of such areas will develop discovery of presently unknown human life and other animal forms. Yesteryear's dread of the fearful unknown may be dispelled in the light of unprecedented modern research and discovery, for they confirm that there is no northern or southern end to the earth. The terrestrial world is in fact a world without end, it is so. Or I could not have told you flights of illusion light that seemingly so far you are not a detached star, and no mystery can be of your shining quality. Though your twinkle seems to be, it's a try, guys. Play on me, for I've learned how they deceive an illusory image, leave as thatch about her celestial sky. You're bewitching to the eye, yet you cover unseen land as desert Italy. Sky in hand, you know, not isolation's polite, though presenting low a sight for your reluctance. Sky embrace, coming to this earthly place. And at last I'm on my way to visit neath your bright display. I won't have to move through space in fantastic rocket pace straight ahead, from polar region over land and mortars, legion moving in established manner. I'll reach your celestial manor. Ephraim Audio, Giannini, 1959. Physical continuity of the universe. The enclosed pages contain the first and only description of the realistic universe of land, water, oxygen, and vegetation, where human and other forms to animal life abound. This is not a work of fiction, nor is it a technical analysis of anything. It is a simple recital of fact which transcends the most elaborate fiction ever conceived. It projects man's first understanding of the factual and endless universe which contains human life throughout its vast length and width, regardless of all abstract theory to the contrary.